miracle. Wow, isn't that mind-blowing? That 2,000 years ago, God raised his son, Jesus, who was deader than dead. Jesus is like a sample resurrection. And what would that sample resurrection look like if it was reproduced again and again? To see millions upon millions of people of every tribe and nation experience that resurrection power. Like, what kind of quality would that look like? What kind of power could be reproduced and working out in their lives? I mean, let's have a look at what that resurrection of Jesus means to us. It's an invitation to examine that quality. And we're supposed to celebrate this marvel, this resurrection only at Easter, but I just think it's too good to be left just to Easter. And then if you look at Revelation 7, it says, and then I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count. All of these people. Amazing. This unique, beautiful passage in Ezekiel, right in the depths of the Old Testament. And I have to say, when I was young and a very young Christian, I was wary of the Old Testament because I just saw this angry God as I perceived him. Whereas in fact, it's the story of the Old Testament. It's just an amazing love story right from the beginning of God's people being continually disobedient and rebelling and constantly turning their backs on God, and with God constantly pursuing them and forgiving them and being gracious to them. But God was constantly warning them about their attitude and telling them that there would be consequences, that they would be removed from their land, and God would remove his presence from them. He kept telling them. Then eventually, after centuries of warning them, the Babylonians came, carried them off into captivity, and God removed his presence from them. And Ezekiel, it paints this very bleak picture of desperation. So I'm going to ask Will if you'll read Ezekiel 37, 1 to 14. Thank you.
Valley of dry bones. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord and set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Then he said to me, Prophesy to these bones and say to them, Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you, and you will make flesh come upon you, and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of man, and say to it, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. Come, breath, from the four winds, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They say, Our bones are dried up and our hope is gone. We are cut off. Therefore, prophesy and say to them, This is what the Sovereign Lord says. My people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord. When I open your graves and bring you up from them, I will put my spirit in you and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done it, declares the Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Wynne. Right. So this is a picture of death and devastation. There's also a picture of the hope which only Jesus can bring, which I find really exciting. See, resurrection is never beyond hope. It's never beyond hope, because the picture Ezekiel paints here is one of a battlefield. There are bodies, everywhere, and it's a battlefield of despair. Vitamin C and arnica they're of no use. These are dead bodies, and not just bodies, that are just unwell. They are skeletons. And so they've been there for some time. And we're also told they are dry bones, but not just dry bones, but bones which have been scattered across the valley. So they've been there a very long time. And this is a really desperate situation. So the point being made here is that this picture is so bad that nothing can be done unless God intervenes. These bodies are utterly beyond hope unless God intervenes. Then suddenly God does intervene. And to these dry bones, God clothes them with skin and flesh so that the skeletons come to life, because God is able to intervene. There is no such thing as living in a state of too much death for God to bring about a resurrection. We think about Jesus, who had been tortured to a point where he's unable to carry his cross. He's subjected to the most barbaric form of execution known in its time, never failed to kill, and it brought about maximum suffering. Then, to make sure he's dead, they pierce his body with a sword, draining his body of fluids and blood. Then Jesus is wrapped really, really tightly in meters and meters of cloth, and he's placed in a borrowed tomb. And the tomb is then sealed with a stone which is believed to have weighed, I don't know, about a two ton, and guarded by the very best soldiers who were known for their vigilance and did not make mistakes, and whose reputation was on the line. So without the intervention of God, his Father, the chances of Jesus feeling just a little bit better, unwrapping the tightly wound cloth and heaving that rock away and weaving his way past these soldiers whose reputation was on the line, it was impossible without the intervention of God, his Father. There is no state too deep to experience the resurrection power of God. One of the passages I really like is in Luke chapter 8, where Jesus is in the region of the Gerasenes, and they meet this guy who's out of his mind, and his loyal friends have done all they can. And this man cannot be restrained. He's so angry, and he's crying out loud. And Luke tells us this man is living among the tombs. So technically he's alive, but really he's dead. He's living in a place of death. There's nothing anyone can do until he meets Jesus. Then within minutes, demons are gone. The man is clothed. He's in his right mind, and he's sitting at the feet of Jesus. He's assumed the teaching position, and he's receiving a teaching at the feet of Jesus. There is no state of too much death, of beyond hope, where Jesus is concerned. And maybe there are aspects of me and you where we are technically alive, but we feel that hope has gone. Maybe within our families, or something we've been praying over, or something that we've never really dealt with. Resurrection hope is only available from God. Can these bones live? And putting aside what happens next, the answer to this question, can these scattered bones live, is surely, well, no, they can't. But at that moment, Ezekiel has a burst of revelation, and he says, "Sovereign Lord, only you know." In other words, no one can do anything with his people, but it is within your gift, your power to bring about change. If you break into this situation, then you alone can bring about change, which I think is amazing. When we think of this village, people used to say to me years ago when we were in Emmanuel, this was a difficult village, this was a hard village, but this is God's village and his people are here, you know? Then when I think about us physically, now there are lots of modern medical procedures that can bring about lots of change, right? They can improve anything these days. You can have a heart transplant, you can have your hips replaced, you can have your knee joints replaced, you can have your teeth removed and new ones, you can have surgery to remove those telltale signs which age us, and cosmetically you can have eyebrows shaping, relaxations and enhancements of all kinds. It's amazing what can be done. You can even have a facelift. So you can have things replaced, you can be reinvented, you can be refreshed, and in dire circumstances, resuscitated. I used to be a fan of casualty and ER, and it's all got really technical these days. And it's got to the point now, if I was on a plane or anywhere else and someone was, is there a doctor in the house? I would have to restrain myself because I reckon I could do that, I could give it a go. I know all the CBCs, I know the chest panels, the Chem 7s, the split spreaders. You can replace, rejuvenate and refresh, but only God can bring about a resurrection. There is no other way to be raised from the dead other than God through his son, Jesus Christ. Now, I often meet, and we all do meet, people who are searching. Came across one, I don't know if there's somebody, I've got that sort of face. I have got that sort of face that someone will spot in a crowd and come up with a begging bowl. There's always one, and it happened to me in Asda a couple of days ago. This couple came out with a couple of bags of alcohol, and they said they had no money. But I helped them. I said, no, I will pray with you. I never saw them again, but I did offer. And they were getting sunburnt. I said, I'll go and get you some sun cream, but they'd gone. But there you go. See, there were the bright young things in the office used to come. They used to go to the gym 7 days a week. And I always know they'd been because they'd be smelling the deep heat. Bandages around the wrists and everything else. Me, I am a very firm believer in the therapeutic properties of cake. So if you're looking for something right now, or if you know someone who is looking for something right now and shopping around, there are a bunch of different options. Sincerely though, we believe if you surrender your life to Jesus, it's the only thing to do, right? It will make an immeasurable difference to your life and to their life. But if you are worried and you need to be sure about where you're going to be when you die, then you need to surrender your life to God. Simple as. And then you will be at peace and be with him in eternity, which doesn't start when we're dead. It's already started. I think we miss that point. We forget that. There's no point in shopping around because no one else can make that promise. And there's only one way to be raised from the dead. Only one way to be with God for eternity, and that's by surrendering our lives to Jesus, not just once, and maybe we need to surrender it a bit more than we do. Well, I certainly do. Now, I love looking around all the different categories on my Kindle, right? I love window shopping on there, but really there is no point in shopping around for a resurrection because God alone can bring about a resurrection. It's only him, brought about by the Holy Spirit. Now, my youngest daughter is really easily inspired. Now, she loves anything sport, and I can tell you now, we've had many broken things in the house. If there was footy on the telly, she'd be doing keepy uppies at the same time. And all she needed in the supermarket was a clear aisle to do a series of flips and stuff like that, because she was an elite gymnast at the expense of the baked beans. She could do all of that. I mean, there wasn't much that this child couldn't do. She sang, she won the competition. She was a big Steadford performer and she was really successful. But she had been watching the Great British Bake Off at this one point. And in typical style, she thought, oh, I can do this. They were baking cakes with vegetables. And having carrots in our fridge, she went for the carrot cakes. Yeah, I can do this. Now, she's going to give this a go. It was not a challenge that she would not take on. And well, to be honest, the points that it was really disappointing. It was so disappointing. She reckoned it could have been used as a spare wheel that kept it going for about 100 miles. It was that bad, But when we talked about it, what she'd missed out, the raising agent. She had missed out the raising agent. She hadn't thought about it. So God's raising agent for raising his people is the Holy Spirit. And Ezekiel's picture, the bones come together and the muscles are replaced and the bodies are covered with skin, and God's breath, which he breathes, is the Holy Spirit, and then the bodies come to life. Now, the Hebrew word for this is, I'm going to get it wrong, ruach, or whatever it is, I don't know. I can't pronounce it. I just saw it written down. And in verses 5, 6 and 14, it talks about the power and the presence of God, which brings people to life by his Holy Spirit. See, now, maybe there's some amongst us, now I'm one of this group, who might say that they don't really mind what happens when we're dead, or what happens, because God has promised to raise us from the dead, and that's enough for me. I don't really worry about do we do this? Or as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to be in God's presence, and that's enough for me. I don't need to question it. Betha never needed to question it. Caris always did. There's always had to be something, you know. God created the world in 6 days. That was Betha, and she'd believe it. Caris would say, well, was that 24 hours in that day? Or no, things like, she was one of those. She was a difficult child. No, she wasn't. She was just different, and we still love her. So anything about us which has the slightest smell of death about us is being worked on right now. It's amazing. A few years ago, when we were in Emmanuel, across the road, that church no longer exists. Just sad. We had a visit from some young men from Teen Challenge. It's a project, as you may know or may not know, for young men who've been struggling with addictions. And one young man, he came from a very strong, loving Christian family, and he spoke about the devastation that he had caused in his family, and then talked about what God had done. And then I remember the leader saying to us after that with the group of men that were there, they had struggled and struggled for so many years that the number of years they'd struggled between them, it came to 224 years. So that's 224 years of life technically being dead because they were living among the tombs. Jesus had to break them free from their addictions, which he is able to do. They encountered Jesus and his resurrection power, which had surged into their bodies and into their minds, and brought about this freedom and full life. It was amazing listening to these young men, and some of them were still struggling. They knew that, but they knew that God had made a difference to their lives, and it gave them that perspective. They knew where they were going, and they knew that even if they failed, that God would forgive them. There would always be a way back, and we forget that sometimes. We used to have a lady in church who was an alcoholic, and she struggled all her life. And we prayed and prayed with her, and she eventually died. But it was so sad. But God didn't stop loving her. And I think we sometimes think, well, God's got to heal it, and therefore, what do? Do we support these people? Do we help them? Do we walk with them in these difficult situations? Because we as a body of believers, I think, are usually quite polite. And some of us have experienced a release sometimes from things that have held us back. Say illnesses, physical stuff, emotional stuff, mental stuff. But with the resurrection power in our lives that Jesus has dealt with and is dealing with, which I think is amazing. The truth is that most of us have something in our lives that we want to change, whether we voice it or not. I'm just going to have to say, talking at my Amazon Kindle, there are 178,862 books with the name Life Change on Amazon. And here's my favorite 6. Superfoods, 14 foods to change your life. 2, change your voice, change your life. 3, change your aura, change your life. 4, this is probably my favorite one, it'd definitely be Bethan's. Change your life without getting out of bed. Feng shui. Change your furniture to change your life. This one I thought was a little bit intriguing for me. Change your underwear to change your life. Interesting titles. So I guess the point here is that most of us want to change something in our lives. So what it comes down to simply is this. Will I seek more of the resurrection power of Jesus in my life? Will I cooperate with the work of the Spirit in my life? Or will I work against him? Because that's hard. We might as well give in. But it's hard. Because sometimes, God has given us, he's given us guidelines and not rules, they're things to keep us safe. Because God has something better for us. And sometimes we find that hard to believe, because sometimes if God says no, it's because we're not sure that God will be enough for us, but he will be. He will be enough for us. So resurrection is for his purpose. Verse 10, these bodies come to life. So what did these bodies do then? Did they have a party to celebrate new life? We don't really know. But it does say that breath entered them. They stood on their feet as a vast army, and they have not just been raised to life, they've been raised to life for a purpose, because God has an intention. So I wonder what the intention is. I guess we think of it as obvious. He's got a to-do list for us, right? That's frightening. He's got a to-do list for us. But here, that doesn't seem to be the case, because this is what it says in verse 22. It says, or 23, they will never again pollute themselves with their idols and their vile images and rebellion, for I will save them from their sinful apostasy. I will cleanse them, then they will truly be my people, and I will be their God. There you are. That was God's original purpose and plan for us, that we would worship him. He would just be our God, that we would just walk with him and talk with him and worship him. That's God's single purpose for us. It was not a to-do list. Anything else comes after that. But John puts it wonderfully in Revelation 21, verses 1 to 4. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now amongst his people. He will live with them and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever." Wonderful. I mean, it doesn't get, life really doesn't get any better than that. The singular purpose of God was not a list of jobs. He is resurrecting and building people. He just wants to be our God. Something for us to think about. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just pray now for this village? These people in this village, people that come into this building, Messy Church, parents and tots that would never step foot in here, and they come and collect their kids on a Friday. They might not come into a church building, but let's just pray for these people that God's resurrection power would just do something wonderful in this village. Let's just spend a few moments just praying for that. If anybody wants to pray, then please do.